Galactic Council members spit out their drinks in shock when human Charles Cook strode in and boldly proclaimed, "Earth has more oxygen than this entire fucking galaxy combined." The stuffy chamber broke into an angry uproar, alien ambassadors shouting over each other at this outrage. A mere human polluting the summit with his presence and spouting such arrogant nonsense. It was unthinkable. Chairman Draco, the proud Hirogen leader, slammed his fist on the podium, his eyes narrowing at Cook. "How dare a primitive monkey like you barge into this sacred hall? Your kind aren't even advanced enough to travel between stars, let alone make such ludicrous claims. Get out before I have you removed." Cook held up a data chip, a sly grin spreading across his face. "I have all the proof right here if you'll let me show it, unless the High and Mighty Council is afraid of the truth." Draco fumed, his scales turning a deeper shade of crimson. The human had some nerve, he'd give him that. But if he didn't shut him up quickly, the subordinate species might start getting ideas. Ideas about humans not being the pathetic backwards savages the Council needed them to be. Cook plugged the chip in, and a hologram of Earth's moon sprang up, covered in swirling clouds of pure, untainted oxygen, more than existed on all the Council homeworlds combined. The aliens fell into a stunned silence. The human was right. Earth held the most precious resource in the universe, and now the balance of power had shifted in the most unexpected way. Draco slammed his gavel down, his voice booming across the chamber. "We will take a brief recess to consider the humans' evidence." He spat out the last word like it left a bad taste in his mouth. "Reconvene in 1 hour." Cook watched as the Hirogen leader stormed off, his advisors scurrying behind him. He had rattled them, that much was clear, but he knew this was far from over. As the other council members filed out, a small group approached Cook, led by a tall, slender alien with shimmering blue skin. "Charles Cook, I am Xander of the Zephyrian delegation," the alien said, extending a long-fingered hand. "We wish to express our support for Earth's inclusion in the Council." Cook shook Xander's hand, surprised by the gesture. "I appreciate that, Xander, but why? Most of the Council seems ready to toss me out the airlock." Xander's violet eyes sparkled with amusement. "We believe humanity's resourcefulness and adaptability could greatly benefit the galactic community. Your kind has accomplished much in a short time. Meeting with you to discuss a potential coalition would be most illuminating." Cook grinned. Allies. Just what he needed. "I'd be happy to meet with you and your colleagues later, Xander. Earth could use some friends on the Council." Meanwhile, in a private chamber, Draco paced before his advisors, his tail lashing angrily. "We cannot allow the humans a seat on the Council. It would upset the balance of power." A scarred Hirogen with a cybernetic eye spoke up. "But the oxygen reserve, it's too valuable to ignore." Draco whirled on him, snarling, "I know that, you fool, which is why we must secure it, without giving Earth more influence." A calculating look spread across his reptilian face. "We will send a delegation to assess the reserve, determine its value, and once we have control of it, the humans will learn their place." When the Council reconvened, Draco addressed Cook directly. "The Council has decided to send a Hirogen delegation to Earth to assess this oxygen reserve, a necessary step before considering your planet's membership." Cook narrowed his eyes. He didn't trust the Hirogen as far as he could throw them, which, considering their size, wasn't very far. "I have a counter-proposal. Any delegation sent to Earth must include representatives from multiple species, for fairness and transparency." Draco's jaw clenched, but he nodded stiffly. "Very well, we will assemble a diverse delegation." As the meeting adjourned, Cook couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Draco had agreed to his terms too easily. His suspicions were confirmed when he received an encrypted message on his comm unit. "Cook, the Hirogens are planning to seize the oxygen reserve by force. The delegation is a cover. Elite warriors posing as diplomats. Watch your back. A friend." Cook stared at the message, a chill running down his spine. He was walking into a nest of vipers, and he'd just invited them to his front door. but he'd be damned if he let them take Earth's most valuable resource without a fight. He needed to outmaneuver Draco, expose his scheme and rally his new allies to his side, but how could he do that when he couldn't trust anyone? Cook typed a coded transmission to Captain Jack Hawkins, his old military buddy, who now led a crack team of Earth Defense Forces operatives. "Hawkins, old friend, I need your help. The Hirogen are up to something with this delegation they're sending. I need eyes on the ground." "We've got you covered, Cook," Hawkins replied, his gruff voice crackling over the secure channel. "I'll have my team pose as miners on the moon. We'll monitor those scaly bastards and make sure they don't pull any fast ones." As the Hirogen ship touched down at the oxygen reserve facility, Cook plastered on a diplomatic smile. He greeted Draco and his entourage, noticing the hulking warriors among them. Kravok, their commander, had a predatory glint in his eye that set Cook on edge. "Welcome to Earth, esteemed guests," Cook said smoothly. "Allow us to give you a tour of our facility." As they walked through the gleaming corridors, Cook kept a close eye on Kravok. The Hirogen warrior seemed to be lagging behind, his clawed hands fidgeting with something in his pockets. Hawkins, monitoring the facility's security feeds from the moon base, zoomed in on Kravok. "What's that ugly lizard up to?" he muttered, enhancing the image. His eyes widened as he saw the glint of metal. "Explosives! That son of a bitch is planting bombs." Cook's comm beeped urgently. He glanced at the message from Hawkins and his blood ran cold. He whirled on Draco, his facade of politeness evaporating. "Care to explain why your man is rigging my facility to blow?" Draco's eyes narrowed, but he kept his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about, human. My warriors are here for security, nothing more." Cook held up his comm, showing the damning footage. "Security, my ass. You're here to steal our oxygen and destroy the evidence. Did you really think you could pull this off under my nose?" Kravok, realizing he was caught, let out a bellowing roar. He drew a wicked-looking blade, lunging at Cook. The other Hirogen followed suit, shedding their diplomatic disguises and revealing their true nature. All hell broke loose as the Hirogen attacked, their surprise assault catching the Earth diplomats off guard. Cook barely managed to dodge Kravok's slashing blade, the razor-sharp edge missing his throat by inches. He activated his comm. "Hawkins, we need backup now." On the moon, Hawkins and his team were already suiting up, grabbing their weapons. "ETA 2 minutes, Cook. Just hold on." Cook and the other diplomats fought desperately, using whatever they could find as weapons. They upended tables for cover, hurling chairs at their attackers. But they were outmatched by the Hirogen's brute strength and combat prowess. In the chaos, Draco slipped away like the coward he was, leaving his warriors to do his dirty work. Cook caught a glimpse of his retreating form and cursed. He'd deal with that treacherous bastard later. Right now, he had to focus on staying alive. Kravok closed in on Cook, his blade dripping with the blood of fallen diplomats. Cook looked into those cold reptilian eyes and knew this fight was to the death. He gripped a metal pipe, ready to meet the Hirogen commander head-on. Their weapons clashed with a resounding clang, sparks flying as they traded blows with savage ferocity. Around them the battle raged on, the stench of blood and smoke filling the once pristine facility. Hawkins and his squad burst into the fray, their pulse rifles spitting deadly energy bolts. The tide was turning, but the Hirogen refused to yield, fighting with the desperate strength of cornered beasts. Cook drove his metal pipe into Kravok's skull with a sickening crunch. The Hirogen commander crumpled to the floor, dark blood pooling beneath his shattered head. Cook staggered back, chest heaving. He surveyed the carnage, the once pristine facility now a battlefield strewn with bodies. Hawkins and his team secured the surviving Hirogen, binding their clawed hands behind their backs. "Search them," Cook ordered. "I want to know what they were really up to here." As the EDF operatives patted down the captives, Hawkins called out, "Cook, you need to see this." Cook strode over, his boots squelching in the blood-slicked floor. Hawkins held up a communicator, its screen flickering with encrypted messages. Kravok was in contact with Draco the whole time. Bastard was pulling the strings. Cook snatched the device, his eyes scanning the damning correspondence. Orders from Draco to sabotage the facility, to frame humanity for the attack. Rage ignited in his gut. He played us. This whole delegation was a setup. Cook clenched his fist around the communicator. Get me an emergency council session. It's time to expose that scaly son of a bitch. Draco paced the command center of the hidden Hyrogen base, his tail lashing. The communicator in his claws chirped, an incoming transmission from Kravok. He activated it, snarling. Static crackled. Then an unfamiliar voice. Kravok is dead, you treacherous fuck, and we have all the proof we need to bury you. Draco froze. Cook, the human, had outplayed him. Panic threatened to take hold, but he shoved it down. He was a Hyrogen. He would not cower before an inferior species. You've signed your own death warrant, human, Draco hissed. When I'm done, Earth will be a smoking ruin. He cut the transmission, his mind racing. He needed to act fast, to spin this to his advantage. Summon the War Council, he barked at a subordinate. We strike at Earth, now. As Hyrogen warships converged on the base, Draco wove a tale of human aggression, of unprovoked slaughter against peaceful diplomats. The humans have violated galactic law, he roared to his assembled commanders. They are a cancer that must be purged for the glory of the Hyrogen. Cheers erupted, chests pounding in unison. They would follow him, they always did. In the council chambers, chaos reigned. News of the attack had spread like wildfire. Some demanded retribution against the humans, others urged caution. But all agreed on one thing. War loomed on the horizon. Cook had to act. He gathered his allies, Xander and the Zephyrians, Hawkins and his EDF operatives. They pored over Kravok's communiques, piecing together the scope of Draco's betrayal. It's worse than we thought, Cook explained. Draco's been plotting this for years. Undermining potential allies, orchestrating conflicts, all to keep the Hyrogen in power. Xander shook his head. The Council will never believe us, not without irrefutable proof. Then we get it, Cook said. We infiltrate that Hyrogen base, hack their networks, drag the truth into the light. Hawkins grinned. Just like old times, huh, Cook? The base bristled with weaponry, its perimeter patrolled by vicious Hyrogen sentinel. Cook and his team advanced through the shadows, their stealth suits blending into the gloom. Hawkins took point, his pulse rifle at the ready. Zephyrian commandos fanned out, their lithe forms scaling sheer walls with ease. Cook followed, his heart pounding. Everything rode on this. A guttural click, movement in the darkness. Hyrogen guards, their reptilian bulk blotting out the stars. Contact! Hawkins barked. Pulse fire lit up the night, the acrid scent of ozone filling the air. Zephyrians struck from above, crystal blades flashing. Hyrogen fell, their armor sundered by inhuman strength. But more always came, a tide of scales and fang crashing against them. Push forward, Cook roared over the cacophony. We have to reach the command hub. They fought for every inch, leaving a trail of Hyrogen corpses in their wake. But they were taking hits too. A commando fell, his chest carved open. An operative lost an arm to a vicious claw strike. Cook gritted his teeth, pain lancing through him from a dozen wounds, but he couldn't stop. Not now. At last the command hub loomed before them, its blast doors thick enough to withstand orbital bombardment. Hawkins slapped a breaching charge on the reinforced metal. Fire in the hole! The world vanished in thunder and flame. They stormed the breach, weapons barking. Hyrogen technicians died at their stations, consoles sparking and shorting. Cook charged towards the central interface, a data probe clutched in his bloody fist. He jacked it into the system, his gauntlet filtering through the flood of intel. Come on, you bastard, he growled. Where did you hide it? There, buried beneath layers of encryption. Draco's communiques, troop deployments, false flag attacks, a web of conspiracy unraveling before his eyes. Hawkins, Cook called out. I have what we need. Purge this place and let's get the hell out of here. Plasma grenades reduced the hub to slag and smoke. Cook and his team fought their way free, Hirogen bodies piling at their feet. But they had done it. They had the truth, now they just had to live long enough to use it. Cook's stolen Hirogen ship shot out of the secret base, engines screaming. Hawkins whooped from the gunner's chair as the damning data streamed into their systems. We got it, Cook. That slimy lizard won't know what hit him. Cook grinned fiercely, hands flying over the unfamiliar controls. Don't celebrate yet, we still have to... Proximity alerts blared. The scanner lit up with incoming signatures. Hirogen fighters led by Draco's personal warship. Pay attention, human scum. Draco's voice crackled over comms dripping with malice. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. How about you eat a dick, you overgrown gecko? Cook snarled back. He wrenched the ship into a steep dive straight into the dense asteroid field. The nimble Hirogen craft dove after them, pulse cannons hammering at their shields. Hawkins returned fire, the ship shuddering as he strained the jury-rigged weapons to their limits. Asteroids filled the view screen, chunks of jagged rock hurtling past on all sides. Cook jinked and juked, narrowly avoiding collision after bone-crushing collision. G-forces slammed the human crew into their restraints. Consoles sparked and smoked. A lucky shot clipped their wing. Damage reports scrolled past, red and urgent. Shields failing, hull breaches, life support critical. We can't take much more of this, Hawkins shouted over the cacophony of rending metal. Cook's eyes narrowed, focused on the monstrous asteroid looming ahead. The plan forming in his mind was reckless, insane even. But what choice did they have? Hawkins, divert all power to engines on my mark. The ship lurched forward, inertial dampeners screaming. They hurtled toward the asteroid, its craggy surface filling the view screen. The Hirogen pressed their assault, confident of their kill. At the last second, Cook wrenched the stick, sending them into a slingshot orbit. The maneuver pushed them to the ragged edge of consciousness, gravity crushing them into jelly. But it worked. They shot out of the asteroid's grasp like a railgun round, the Hirogen ships left far behind. Open space stretched before them, the void broken only by the glittering expanse of the galactic core. Cook sagged back into his chair, his breath ragged. They'd made it, barely. Hawkins, get on the horn with our allies in the Council. It's time to blow this conspiracy wide open. As Hawkins set to work, Cook allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Draco thought he could frame humanity, use them as pawns in his game of galactic dominion. But he'd picked the wrong fucking species to mess with. When you backed humans into a corner, when you threatened their home, that's when they were most dangerous. And if Draco thought this was the end of it, he had another thing coming. This was only the beginning. Cook would see that smug lizard brought to his knees one way or another. News of Cook's evidence spread like wildfire through the Council. An emergency session was called, the location chosen carefully. A remote space station, neutral territory far from Hirogen influence. But while diplomats debated and postured, Draco acted. The would-be tyrant, fueled by desperation and rage, sent word to his waiting armada. The time for subterfuge had passed. Now was the hour of conquest. Hirogen warships converged on Earth, a swarm of predatory metal hungering for human blood. Their orders were simple: seize the oxygen reserves, crush any resistance, leave none alive. Draco would have his prize, even if he had to burn a world to get it. Oblivious to the threat, Cook and his team arrived at the Council station, the weight of their evidence heavy on their shoulders. This was their chance, their one shot at exposing Draco's web of lies and manipulation. The great powers of the galaxy took their seats, eyeing the humans with a mix of suspicion and anticipation. Cook stood tall before them, his battered armor still stained with Hirogen blood. He opened his mouth to speak. "Incoming vessels," a technician called out, fear strangling his voice. "Configuration matches, Hirogen warships, hundreds of them." A stunned silence fell over the Council. Then a storm of shouting, recriminations, panic. They had no defenses, no fleet. They were sitting ducks. Cook slammed his armored fist on the podium, the impact cracking the ancient stone. "Silence!" he roared. "You all know the truth now. Draco is coming, and he means to have Earth, to have humanity's future. I won't let that happen, but we can't do this alone." He met the eyes of every councillor in turn, holding their gazes unflinchingly. "I'm asking you, no, I'm begging you, stand with us, fight with us. Show the galaxy that we are more than the sum of our fears, that when the strong prey on the weak, the righteous stand as one." His words hung in the air, a challenge and a prayer. On the view screens, the Hirogen fleet grew larger, an onrushing tide of destruction. Cook had faith in his crew, in the strength and courage of humanity. But against the might of the Hirogen war machine, would it be enough? As the first ships opened fire, lighting the void with the unholy radiance of weapons never meant for mortal hands, Cook had only one thought. And so it begins. The Hirogen fleet loomed before the Council space station, 1,000 warships bristling with destructive energy. On the station's main view screen, the approaching armada was a swarm of angry red dots, growing larger by the second. Cook burst into the council chamber, Hawkins and Xander at his side. The assembled diplomats turned to face him, their expressions ranging from surprise to open hostility. "Councillors, I have incontrovertible proof that Draco has been manipulating us all," Cook shouted, slamming a data chip into the central console. The view screen flickered, then filled with the damning evidence Cook's team had risked everything to obtain. Secret communiques, false flag attacks, the murder of dissenting voices, all of it bearing Draco's signature. The chamber erupted into chaos, a cacophony of shocked gasps and angry shouts. Some called for Draco's immediate arrest, others demanded the humans answer for their alleged crimes. "Silence!" Xander bellowed, his normally placid features twisted with rage. "While we bicker, the Hirogen come for us all. Earth, the Council, the very future of our civilizations." "We fight," Cook said simply. "This station's defenses won't hold against a full Hirogen assault, but I have a plan." He brought up a schematic of the Hirogen flagship, a monstrous wedge of armor and gun batteries. "If we can get a strike team onto that ship, we can disable its weapons, capture Draco, cut the head off the Serpent." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. It was a bold plan, reckless even. But what choice did they have? "The Council's fleet is already on its way," Xander said, "but they won't arrive in time. We must act now." He turned to his fellow councillors, his voice ringing with authority. "I propose we send our finest warriors to accompany Cook and Hawkins. Together, they will board the flagship and end this madness." One by one, the councillors nodded their assent. The decision was made. As the strike team assembled in the teleportation bay, Cook felt a hand on his shoulder, Hawkins, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Just like old times, eh, Cook?" Cook grinned, checking the charge on his pulse rifle. "Let's show these scaly bastards what humans are made of." The teleporter flared, and the universe dissolved into a blizzard of light and sound. When it cleared, they were standing in a dark, pulsing corridor deep within the Hirogen ship. They surged forward, a deadly phalanx of human, Zephyrian, and a dozen other species. Energy bolts filled the air, searing flesh and cracking bone. A hulking Hirogen warrior loomed before Cook, a vicious polearm clutched in his claws. Cook ducked under the slashing blades, hammering his rifle butt into the alien's scaly gut. The Hirogen doubled over, wheezing. Cook silenced him with a point-blank headshot, spraying the bulkhead with steaming gore. "Keep pushing!" he roared over the din of battle. "We're almost there." At last the bridge doors loomed before them, a massive portal of reinforced alloy. Hawkins slapped a breaching charge on the unyielding metal, grinning like a feral animal. The world vanished in fire and noise. They charged through the smoking ruin, weapons spitting death. And there at the center of it all stood Draco. The Hirogen leader was a tower of muscle and malice, his eyes burning with hate. His elite guard closed ranks around him, a wall of flesh and fang. The Hirogen laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Foolish primate. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, what forces you've unleashed." He drew a crackling energy blade, the edges shimmering with deadly power. "Come then, Charles Cook. Let us end this once and for all." They met in a clash of steel and fury, the human and the Hirogen locked in mortal combat. Around them the strike team grappled with Draco's guard, the bridge descending into a maelstrom of close-quarters savagery. Cook parried a slashing blow, the energy blade sizzling past his face. He countered with a vicious kick, his armored boot slamming into Draco's knee with a sickening crunch. The Hirogen staggered, his stance faltering for a split second. Cook pressed the advantage, raining blows on Draco's head and torso, the alien's scales cracking under the relentless assault. But Draco was far from finished. With a roar of primal rage, he surged forward, his blade a blur of lethal energy. It carved through Cook's armor like paper, searing flesh and bone. Cook screamed, agony lancing through his body. He fell back, clutching at the smoking ruin of his shoulder. Draco loomed over him, his fanged maw twisted in a vicious grin. "Pathetic creature. Did you really think you could best me? I, who have ground 1,000 worlds beneath my heel?" He raised his blade for the killing blow. And the ship shuddered, a deep, bone-jarring vibration that sent Draco stumbling. Warning klaxons blared, red light pulsing in time with the wailing sirens. Draco's eyes widened, shock and fury warring on his reptilian features. "What have you done, human?" He lunged forward, a final desperate gambit. He slammed into Draco with bone-crushing force, sending them both tumbling across the bridge. Then through the yawning portal of an open escape pod, the hatch slid shut with a hiss of hydraulics, sealing them in. On the bridge, Hawkins and the strike team fought their way clear of the remaining Hirogen, energy bolts and crystalline blades flashing in the strobing emergency lights. "Cook," Hawkins shouted into his comm, "where are you?" Static crackled. Then Cook's voice, strained and distant, "Get out of there, Hawkins. Get the team out. I'll handle Draco." Hawkins hesitated, his heart warring with his duty. But he knew Cook was right. The mission came first. The team came first. "Give 'em hell, Cook," he said softly. Then to the others, "Fall back, everyone to the teleporters now." They ran, a fighting retreat through smoke and fire and blood. The last thing Hawkins saw before the world dissolved into light was the Hirogen flagship, a monstrous shape silhouetted against the stars. And then it erupted, a miniature sun blooming in the void. A wave of force and radiation slammed into the surrounding Hirogen ships, cracking hulls and shattering shields. On the bridge of the Council flagship, Xander watched in awe as the Hirogen fleet reeled, their formation breaking like shattered glass. The tide had turned. The day was theirs. But at what cost? The escape pod bucked and shuddered as it plummeted through Vortex Prime's turbulent atmosphere, its heat shields glowing cherry red. Inside, Cook and Draco clung to their restraints, their faces contorted in pain and concentration. With a bone-jarring impact, the pod slammed into the dense jungle canopy, carving a path of destruction through the tangled foliage. It skidded to a halt in a cloud of steam and shredded vegetation, its hull battered and scorched. For a moment, there was only the hiss of cooling metal and the distant cries of alien creatures. Then, with a groan of effort, Cook wrenched open the crumpled hatch and dragged himself out onto the mossy ground, his body battered and bruised. Draco emerged a moment later, his scales lacerated and his left arm hanging at an unnatural angle. He hissed in pain as he surveyed their surroundings, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "We're stuck on this primitive rock, human," he growled, "and if we want to survive long enough to get off it, we'll need to work together." Cook spat a glob of blood onto the ground, his eyes hard. "I don't like it any more than you do, Lizard, but you're right, we need each other." They salvaged what they could from the wreckage, a few days' worth of rations, some basic medical supplies, a pair of pulse pistols. Then, with grim determination, they set out into the alien jungle, two mortal enemies forced into an uneasy alliance. The jungle was a savage, unforgiving place, a riot of colors and sounds and smells that assaulted their senses. Massive trees towered overhead, their trunks encrusted with luminescent fungi and crawling with centipede-like creatures the length of a man's arm. Strange birds flitted through the canopy, their cries echoing through the humid air. And everywhere there was the sense of being watched, of unseen predators lurking just out of sight. They hadn't gone far when they encountered their first challenge, a grove of innocuous-looking plants, their leaves a vibrant purple, their flowers a delicate blue. Cook, his survival instincts honed by years of military training, held up a hand in warning. "Wait," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Those aren't just plants. Look at the way the leaves are moving." Draco peered closer, his reptilian nostrils flaring. "You're right, carnivorous if I had to guess, and venomous most likely." As if in response, one of the plants lashed out with a whip-like tendril, its tip glistening with a viscous green liquid. Cook leapt back, the tendril missing him by inches. He drew his pulse pistol, but Draco stayed his hand. "No, you fool, the noise will attract every predator for miles." The Hirogen reached into his tattered robes and withdrew a small spherical device. With a flick of his clawed thumb, he armed it and tossed it into the grove. The device detonated with a muted thump, releasing a cloud of shimmering silver mist. Where the mist touched the plants, they withered and blackened, their leaves curling in on themselves like burning paper. "Hirogen bioagent," Draco said with a grim smile. "Lethal to most plant life, harmless to anything else. I always keep a few on hand for situations like this." Cook nodded, grudgingly impressed. They pressed on deeper into the jungle, the bioagent leaving a path of desiccated foliage in their wake. But the plants were only the beginning. As they trekked through a particularly dense patch of undergrowth, a droning buzz filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Cook's eyes widened in alarm. "Insect swarm, take cover!" But there was nowhere to hide. The swarm descended on them like a living cloud, a seething mass of iridescent wasp-like creatures, each the size of a small bird. They swarmed around Cook and Draco, their wings beating frantically, their stingers dripping with venom. The two warriors fought desperately, swatting and shooting, but for every insect they killed, a dozen more took its place. Cook cried out as a stinger pierced his neck, a burning pain spreading through his body. Beside him, Draco was faring no better, his scales pitted and oozing from countless stings. In a last desperate gambit, Cook fumbled a grenade from his belt and primed it. "Fire in the hole," he yelled, and lobbed it into the heart of the swarm. The grenade detonated with a thunderous boom, the shockwave shredding the insects like confetti. Cook and Draco hit the ground, their ears ringing, their bodies peppered with bits of chitinous shrapnel. For a long moment they lay there, gasping for breath, their bodies racked with pain. Then slowly they staggered to their feet, leaning on each other for support. "We can't keep going like this," Cook panted, his vision blurring. "We need to find shelter." Draco nodded, his face ashen beneath his scales. "Agreed, and fast, before that noise attracts something even worse." As if on cue, a savage roar split the air, a sound that sent icy tendrils of fear down their spines. They turned, their weapons at the ready. And froze, their blood turning to ice water in their veins. For looming out of the jungle, its massive body rippling with corded muscle, its maw bristling with dagger-like teeth, was a creature straight out of a nightmare. The Vortex Stalker. It fixed its baleful yellow eyes on them, a low growl rumbling in its throat. Cook and Draco exchanged a look of pure, undiluted terror. Then, as one, they turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth, the stalker's roar echoing in their ears. The hunt was on, and they were the prey. With sweat and grime coating their skin, Cook and Draco hunched over the escape pod's gutted communication system, their hands a blur as they rewired circuits and spliced connections. The acrid stench of burnt plastic hung in the humid air, mingling with the cloying scent of the alien jungle. Sparks flew as Draco jammed a salvaged power cell into the jury-rigged transmitter. "Try it now," he growled, his reptilian eyes narrowed in concentration. Cook flipped a switch, his heart pounding. The system crackled, then hummed to life. A surge of triumph flooded through him, as he punched in the emergency frequency. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Charles Cook. I'm stranded on Vortex Prime with Draco. Request immediate extraction." Static filled the air. Then a familiar voice cut through the white noise. "Cook, is that really you, you crazy bastard?" Relief washed over Cook at the sound of Hawkins' gruff tone. "Jack, you have no idea how good it is to hear your voice." The escape pod shuddered as a council dropship descended through the canopy, its thrusters kicking up a maelstrom of leaves and debris. Cook and Draco shielded their eyes as the ramp lowered, revealing a heavily armed extraction team led by a grim-faced Hawkins. "We have to move fast," Hawkins barked as Cook and Draco stumbled aboard, the jungle vanishing behind them as the ramp sealed shut with a hiss. "Earth is under attack." Hawkins's jaw clenched. A Hyrogen splinter group loyal to Draco has seized the oxygen reserve facility. They're threatening to cut off the galaxy's air supply if their demands aren't met. Draco slammed his fist into the bulkhead, his eyes blazing. "Those traitorous dogs, I'll flay them alive." As the dropship rocketed away from Vortex Prime, Cook stared out the viewport at the stars blurring past, his mind racing. They had to stop the rebels, whatever the cost. The fate of Earth, and the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The council chamber was in chaos, panicked shouts echoing off the vaulted ceiling as diplomats from 100 worlds argued and postured. Cook, Draco, and Hawkins pushed their way through the throng, their faces grim. "We have a plan," Cook announced as they reached the central podium. The chamber fell silent, every eye fixed on the unlikely trio. Cook brought up a holographic schematic of the oxygen facility, the image rotating slowly above the councillors' heads. "We hit them from two fronts. The council fleet will engage the rebel ships in orbit, while a ground team led by Draco and myself infiltrates the facility to disable their control over the oxygen systems." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some skeptical, others intrigued. Xander, the Zephyrian councillor, stepped forward, his violet eyes flashing. "It's a bold plan, Cook, but can we trust Draco after all that has happened?" Draco bared his fangs, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "I want those traitors dead as much as you do, Xander. My honor demands it." Cook nodded, meeting Xander's gaze unflinchingly. "We're all in this together now. Earth's survival and the galaxy's depends on us putting aside our differences and working as one." The councillors exchanged glances. Then, one by one, they nodded their assent. The plan was approved. As the council fleet assembled in orbit, Cook and Draco hand-picked their ground team, choosing the best operatives from a dozen species. There was Zara, the lithe Zephyrian assassin, Grok, the hulking Krogan berserker, and Nixa, the brilliant Solarian hacker. Each brought a unique set of skills to the table, honed by years of training and combat. They gathered in the hangar bay of the council flagship, checking weapons and armor as the fleet prepared for battle. Cook strode before them, his eyes hard as flint. "This is it," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "The moment we've all been training for. The Hyrogen rebels think they can bring the galaxy to its knees. They think they can make us bow to their will." He clenched his fist, his knuckles cracking. "But they're wrong. Because they don't know what we're made of. They don't know the lengths we'll go to protect our own. Today, we show them what happens when you mess with Earth. Today, we take back what's ours." A roar went up from the assembled operatives, a primal battle cry that shook the deck plates. They were ready. Ready to fight, ready to bleed, ready to die for their cause. As the fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Earth, the rebel ships opened fire, lances of searing energy crisscrossing the void. The council ships returned fire, their guns thundering as they clashed in a titanic battle for supremacy. Amidst the chaos, a single dropship broke away from the fleet, streaking towards the planet's surface. Cook, Draco, and their team were on board, their faces grim as they hurtled towards their target. The oxygen facility loomed before them, its gleaming spires and domes rising from the barren moonscape. The dropship touched down in a cloud of lunar dust, the team pouring out, weapons at the ready. Cook signaled silently, and they split into two groups. He led Zara and Grok towards the control room, while Draco took Nixa and the others to secure the oxygen tanks. As they advanced through the facility's sterile corridors, the rebels attacked, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Cook and his team dove for cover, returning fire with grim determination. They fought their way forward, leaving a trail of rebel bodies in their wake. Zara moved like a ghost, her monomolecular blade flashing as she cut down Hirogen warriors with lethal grace. Grok waded into the fray like a force of nature, his hammer smashing armor and bone with brutal efficiency. At last they reached the control room, its blast doors sealed tight. Cook nodded to Zara, who slapped a breaching charge on the reinforced metal. The explosion rocked the corridor, smoke billowing as they charged through the gap. Inside, a squad of elite Hirogen guards awaited them, led by a massive warrior with a skull-like face. Zorgax, the rebel leader, grinned savagely as he leveled his plasma rifle at Cook's chest. "Welcome to your tomb, human," he snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Cook didn't waste time on words. He lunged forward, a blur of motion as he closed the distance. His fist slammed into Zorgax's jaw with a sickening crunch, sending the Hirogen staggering back. Behind him, Zara and Grok engaged the other rebels, the room dissolving into a maelstrom of close-quarters violence. Cook pressed his attack, raining blows on Zorgax with relentless fury. But Cook refused to yield. He thought of Earth, of the billions of lives hanging in the balance. He thought of his fallen comrades, of the sacrifices they'd made to bring him to this moment. With a roar of defiance, he unleashed a final devastating combination, his fists pounding Zorgax's face into a ruined mess. The rebel leader crumpled, his body hitting the deck with a dull thud. Breathing hard, Cook turned to see Zara and Grok standing amidst a pile of Hirogen corpses, their armor spattered with gore. Grok flashed him a thumbs up, his bloody face split by a savage grin. But their victory was short-lived. Zorgax, with his dying breath, had triggered a fail-safe mechanism. A countdown began, the numbers ticking down towards 0 with merciless precision. "He's rigged the entire facility to blow," Zara shouted, her fingers flying over the control panel as she tried to abort the sequence. But it was no use. The rebels had locked them out of the system. Cook activated his comm, his voice urgent. "Draco, we've got a problem. Zorgax triggered a self-destruct. We need to evacuate now." Draco's response was terse, his breathing labored. "We're a little busy here, Cook. The rebels have rigged the oxygen tanks with explosives. I'm trying to disarm them, but there's not much time." Cook's heart pounded as he watched the countdown tick towards oblivion. They had minutes, maybe less. He looked at Zara and Grok, saw the resolve etched on their alien features. "We have to stop this," he said, his voice calm despite the fear coiling in his gut. "We have to find a way. For Earth. For the galaxy. Failure is not an option." The countdown reached 30 seconds, the numbers glowing an angry red. Cook took a deep breath, his mind racing as he sought a solution. There had to be a way. There had to be. And then it hit him. A desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort, but it was their only chance. "Nixa, can you hear me?" he barked into his comm. The Solarian's voice crackled back, strained but determined. "Barely, Cook. We're kind of in the middle of something here. I need you to hack into the facility's environmental systems, vent the oxygen from the storage tanks into the main reactor." "Are you insane?" Nixa sputtered. "That much O2, it'll cause a chain reaction. The whole place will go up like a supernova." "Exactly," Cook said grimly. "We can't stop the countdown, but we can make sure the rebels don't get what they want. We can make sure Earth's oxygen doesn't fall into their hands." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Draco's voice, hard as steel. "Do it, Nixa. Cook's right. It's the only way." The countdown hit 10 seconds. Cook watched, his heart in his throat, as Nixa's fingers danced across the control panel. 5 seconds. 4, 3. A rumble shook the facility, a deep, bone-jarring vibration. The oxygen tanks were venting, the precious gas flooding into the reactor core. 2 seconds. 1. Cook closed his eyes, bracing for the end. But instead of oblivion, he felt a rush of air, a mighty wind that lifted him off his feet and sent him tumbling through space. And then silence, blessed empty silence. Cook opened his eyes, blinking away the after-images. He was floating in the void, surrounded by the shattered remnants of the facility. His suit had sealed automatically, its life support systems kicking in to keep him alive in the vacuum. He saw the others, their forms drifting nearby. Draco, his armor scorched and pitted, Zara, her hair fanning out behind her like a halo. Grok, his hammer still clutched in one massive fist. They had done it. They had stopped the rebels, had saved Earth and the galaxy from their insidious plot. But at what cost? Cook's gaze fell on the blue-green curve of Earth, so beautiful, so fragile against the infinite blackness of space. He had fought for his homeworld, had bled for it, had been willing to die for it. And in that moment, he knew he would do it all again in a heartbeat. For Earth, for humanity, for the future. The Council fleet descended from the heavens, dropships and shuttles swarming around the survivors, plucking them from the void like motes of dust. Cook let himself be carried into the waiting embrace of a medical bay, his body battered and bruised, but his spirit unbroken. There would be time to rest, to heal, to mourn the fallen. But for now he allowed himself a moment of triumph, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. They had won. Against all odds, against all opposition, they had emerged victorious, and though the road ahead would be long and hard, Cook knew they would face it together. Humans and aliens, former enemies turned allies, bound by a common cause, a common destiny. The future was theirs to shape, theirs to mold. Can't shape it they would, one battle at a time, one sacrifice at a time, for the sake of all that they held dear. He dreamed of Earth, of rolling green hills and crystal blue oceans. He dreamed of a galaxy at peace, of 1,000 worlds united in common purpose. And he knew, with a certainty that burned in his very bones, that he would fight for that dream until his dying breath. It was, after all, the human thing to do. The seconds ticked down, each one an eternity, as Cook and his team raced to halt the impending detonation. Sweat poured down Cook's face, his fingers flying across the control panel. With a final, desperate keystroke, he slammed his fist against the console. "Lockdown initiated!" Metal blast doors slammed down, sealing off the control room. The detonation signal fizzled out, unable to reach the explosives. Cook let out a ragged breath, his heart pounding. But the victory was short-lived. They were trapped. The lockdown, their only salvation, now a prison. In the tank chamber, Draco gritted his teeth as he worked to disarm the remaining explosives. His team had neutralized most of the charges, but the tanks were still unstable. The pressure valves, he realized with grim certainty, they had to be released manually, from inside the chamber. Draco met the eyes of his team, saw the understanding there. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. "Get out of here. Seal the chamber behind me." In the control room, Cook paced like a caged animal, his mind racing. There had to be a way out. There had to be... His gaze fell on Zorgax's corpse, the rebel leader's handprint the key to their salvation. Cook's jaw tightened. He knew what he had to do. He drew his combat knife, the blade gleaming in the emergency lights. With a snarl, he hacked at Zorgax's wrist, the blade biting through bone and sinew. Blood sprayed, hot and sticky on his face. Cook fought down the bile rising in his throat and kept cutting. The hand came free with a sickening pop. Cook snatched it up, the flesh already cooling in his grip. He slammed it against the biometric scanner. Zorgax's dead fingers splayed obscenely. A beep, a hiss of hydraulics. The lockdown lifted, the doors sliding open. "Move!" Cook roared, already sprinting for the exit. His team followed, their boots pounding on the metal deck. In the tank chamber, Draco heaved at the pressure valves, his muscles screaming. The gauges inched down too slowly. The tanks groaned, the metal straining under the immense forces within. A crack appeared in the chamber wall, a spiderweb of fractures spreading from it. Draco redoubled his efforts, his vision tunneling. Almost there. The explosion rocked the facility, a deafening roar that shook the very foundations. Cook and his team stumbled, nearly losing their footing. They burst from the facility, the cool night air a blessed relief after the claustrophobic corridors. Behind them, the oxygen reserve went up like a small sun, fire and debris hurling into the sky. The shockwave hit them like a hammer blow, sending them sprawling. Cook pushed himself up, his ears ringing, his team alive, battered but alive, but Draco. He stared at the burning ruin, his heart sinking. No one could have survived that. No one. The figure staggered from the flames, his armor scorched and dented. Draco, alive, injured, barely able to stand, but alive. Cook rushed to him, catching the Hirogen as he stumbled. "You crazy son of a bitch," he muttered, slinging Draco's arm over his shoulders. "You did it." They limped clear of the burning facility, the night sky above them filled with the lights of the Council fleet, the Hirogen rebel ships, nothing more than drifting debris now. Cook and Draco collapsed to the ground, their bodies finally giving out. Around them, Council ships descended, medics and soldiers pouring out. They lay there side by side as the medics tended to their wounds. In the distance, the ruins of the oxygen facility smoldered, a testament to the price of their victory. A council member approached, his face a mix of awe and respect. "Charles Cook, Draco, the council has reached a decision, unanimous. Earth will have a seat at our table, and you will be honored as the heroes you are." Cook managed a weak grin, his hand finding Draco's. The Hirogen clasped it, his grip strong despite his injuries. Heroes. It had a nice ring to it. As the dust settled and the galaxy began to process the incredible events that had transpired, Charles Cook and Draco found themselves at the center of a media firestorm. News outlets across the stars clamored for interviews, hailing the unlikely duo as the saviors of the galactic oxygen supply, and the heroes who had thwarted the Hirogen rebellion. The council wasted no time in organizing a grand ceremony to honor their bravery. Dignitaries from every corner of the galaxy gathered on the newly rebuilt council headquarters, a gleaming testament to the resilience of the allied species. Cook and Draco stood side by side on the podium, their battered armor replaced with sleek formal attire befitting their newfound status. As the applause died down and the speeches began, Cook found his gaze drawn to Draco. The Hirogen warrior stood tall and proud, but Cook could see the pain etched in his features. The injuries he had sustained during their desperate fight to save the oxygen facility were taking their toll. Midway through the ceremony, Draco staggered, his legs giving out beneath him. Cook lunged forward, catching his former rival before he could hit the ground. Medics rushed to the stage, but it was too late. Draco's wounds were too severe, and he breathed his last in Cook's arms. The galaxy mourned the loss of a true hero, and Cook found himself grappling with a profound sense of grief. Draco had started as his enemy, but through their trials and tribulations they had forged an unbreakable bond. Now, that bond had been severed, leaving Cook feeling adrift in a sea of uncertainty. In the wake of the tragedy, the Council convened an emergency session. The Hirogen rebellion had exposed deep flaws in the galactic security apparatus, and it was clear that sweeping changes were needed. After much deliberation, the Council announced the formation of a new joint task force, comprised of the best and brightest from each member species. To Cook's surprise, they appointed him as the task force's leader. It was a daunting responsibility, but one he knew he had to accept. He owed it to Draco, and to all those who had sacrificed so much to preserve the fragile peace. As the task force began its work, sifting through mountains of intelligence reports and sensor logs, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The Hirogen rebels, it seemed, had not been acting alone. A trail of encrypted communications and covert financial transactions led to a shadowy organization known only as the Phantom Syndicate. The more they dug, the clearer it became that the Syndicate had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, manipulating the Hirogen and other disaffected groups to sow chaos and discord throughout the galaxy. But who was at the helm of this nefarious conspiracy, and what was their endgame? Cook knew that he and his team had to act fast. They organized a daring infiltration mission, slipping into the heart of Syndicate territory under the cover of darkness. As they made their way deeper into the criminal underworld, they found themselves in a deadly game of cat and mouse, constantly one step ahead of their shadowy adversaries. Finally, after weeks of covert operations and close calls, they managed to uncover the identity of the Phantom Syndicate's leader. Cook felt his blood run cold as he stared at the holographic image flickering before him. It was Xander, the Zephyrian diplomat who had once been one of Earth's most vocal supporters on the Council. The revelation sent shockwaves through the task force. How could someone so highly respected, so seemingly dedicated to galactic unity, be the mastermind behind such a nefarious plot? As they dug deeper, the truth became clear. Xander had been using the Syndicate to orchestrate conflicts and power plays across the galaxy, all with the aim of destabilizing the Council and seizing control for himself. Cook knew that confronting Xander would be the fight of his life. The Zephyrian was a skilled warrior and a cunning strategist, with vast resources and a network of loyal operatives at his disposal. But Cook also knew that he had no choice. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The final confrontation took place on a remote, windswept planet, far from the prying eyes of the galactic media. Cook and Xander faced off amid the ruins of an ancient civilization, their weapons clashing in a brutal dance of death. It was a battle that pushed Cook to his limits, both physically and emotionally. Xander taunted him, mocking Draco's sacrifice and the futility of his quest for peace. But Cook refused to be swayed. He fought with a fierce determination, channeling all of his grief and rage into every blow. In the end, Cook emerged victorious, but at a terrible cost. The task force had succeeded in dismantling the Phantom Syndicate, but the damage had been done. The galaxy was left reeling, with long simmering tensions between species threatening to boil over into all-out war. As Cook stood on the observation deck of the Council headquarters, gazing out at the stars, he couldn't help but feel a sense of hopelessness. Draco had given his life for the dream of a united galaxy, but that dream now seemed further away than ever. But even in his darkest moments, Cook refused to give up. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, fraught with challenges and setbacks. But he also knew that he had a duty to honor Draco's legacy, to fight for the greater good no matter the cost. And so, with a heavy heart but an unbreakable spirit, Charles Cook turned his gaze to the future, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead. For the sake of the galaxy, for the memory of his fallen friend, he would not rest until true peace was achieved. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.